Bay. When you think of sea serpents in Massachusetts, you might think of Penobscot, Nahant, or Gloucester. But Plymouth, Massachusetts also had many sightings of sea serpents in the 1800s. And also, one unicorn. Stick around to find out more. So, I have my co-host here, who I knew would finally come in handy for something. We'll get to the unicorn story, the unicorn of Plymouth, at the very end of the video. We're going to start off with the sea serpents of Plymouth, the sea monsters of Plymouth, because there's a few stories on that, on that creature who doesn't have a name. He needs a name. Starting way back in 1638, there was the very first sighting of a sea monster over here in North America. Then as time went on, more sightings were seen in the late 1700s up in Maine, but most famously because of the dedication of a society called the Linnaean Society, we have the Great Gloucester Sea Serpent of 1817. And it was the most documented case of the sea serpent, as it was seen by thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of people, and very well documented. The Linnaean Society was a society formed in Boston in 1814 to promote natural history, and they organized a museum, and if you're a member of this society, there was lectures and excursions that you could go on. Unfortunately for the Linnaean Society, they got involved with the Gloucester Sea Serpent in 1817, and it wasn't too long after that that the society was dissolved. There is still a Linnaean Society in London and New York, though, I was able to find, but I don't think they have anything to do with sea serpents anymore. So if it wasn't for the Linnaean Society, we would not have such a detailed account of the sea creature that was seen in Plymouth Bay in 1815. Starting in 1817, the Society began to rigorously investigate this sea serpent. And the sea serpent had first been sighted back in 1638 off of Cape Ann by James Josselyn. And he was a traveler of New England who wrote a book on the flora and fauna of the area and his adventures. And his book was titled An Account of Two Voyages to New England during the years 1638 and 1663. And lucky for you, I have the account right here to read to you. If you don't want to hear any of these accounts, you can skip ahead. There's a table of contents down below if this portion is boring to you. June the 6th and 20th day, so I guess that was June 26th. It was very floamy, and I had to look up what floamy meant. It means turbulent. It's a word no longer in use. So it was very turbulent and lightning and thunder. I heard now two of the gratefulest and fearfulest thunderclaps that ever were heard, I am confident. At this time we had from neighboring gentlemen in our home who came to welcome us into the country. Were amongst a variety of discourse they told me of a young lion, not long before killed, and of a sea serpent, or snake, that lay coiled up like a cable upon a rock at Cape Ann. A boat passing by with English aboard and two Indians, they would have shot the serpent, but the Indians dissuaded them, saying that if he were not killed outright, they would be all in danger of their lives. That was hard to read because the F's were S's back then, so I had to think a little while reading that. But getting back to the Linnaean Society, they circulated questionnaires to people who had had sightings of sea serpents, and they wrote up a very scientifically informed report. And this is how we get the very detailed account of Captain Elkhana Finney. I hope I'm saying Elkhana right. He was a captain of a fishing ship called the Juno, and he lived in Plymouth and sailed from Plymouth. The Society heard of Finney and wrote to Samuel Davies in Plymouth, who was the Justice of the Peace. And I will read you the entire correspondence, which was put into their report. And as I said, if you want to just skip ahead and just hear Captain Finney's story of the Sea Serpent, there'll be a timestamp down below in the table of contents, so you can just skip ahead and hear that if you don't care to hear the whole thing. Boston, September 1st, 1817. Sir, at a meeting of the Linnaean Society on the 18th, the subscribers were appointed to a committee for the purpose of collecting any evidence which may exist respecting a remarkable animal denominated a sea serpent, reported to have been recently seen in and near the harbor of Gloucester. The committee have procured evidence from Gloucester, which they are prepared to report to the Society, and this evidence is of such character that they have thought it expedient to extend their inquiry to other reported appearances of a similar nature on our coast. An appearance of this sort is mentioned as having been noticed by some persons at Plymouth 2 or 3 years since. We would ask your assistance in procuring evidence on this subject. Your connection with the Society seems to authorize the request of your assistance in having the evidence on this subject, which may exist at Plymouth, properly taken and transmitted, but separately from any such claims. We know your habitual readiness to aid in any investigation in natural science. This subject is now of general interest among us, and will probably be so abroad. Any cooperation which you may wish from magistrates and intelligent gentlemen at Plymouth, we doubt not will be readily afforded you. We shall suspend our final report to the Society until your communication shall be received. Yours respectfully and with esteem, the committee. And that was to Mr. Samuel Davies of Plymouth. It took him a month to write back. So Plymouth, October 2nd, 1817. Gentlemen, enclosed is a deposition duly authorized of Captain E. Finney of this town, descriptive of an unusual animal which was seen by him in the outer harbor of Plymouth in June 1815. Captain Finney lives a few miles from town and is much engaged in business, which must apologize for the delay that has followed since the receipt of your letter of the 1st of September. His deposition is impartial and unbiased, and agrees uniformly with the first declaration in 1815. Besides, he has not read whatever he may have heard of the Cape Ann description. He has been, from his youth, accustomed to a seafaring life in the fishing employ and in foreign voyages, has frequently seen whales and almost every species of fish. The drawing on the other page, made by me, I have shown to the Captain Finney, who says it illustrates his conceptions of the subject exactly. All your questions were asked him, and when his replies are negative, such as gills, breathing holes, etc., etc., it must not be inferred that such things were not displayed, but only that he did not see them. Certain house carpenters, who were at work on a building near the spot, also saw it, as well as many others. These persons dwell with emphasis on the long and distinct wake made in the water by the passage of the fish. As to the point of time, it must have been from known data between the 18th and 25th of June, and I would remark that this is exactly the season when the fish setting in of mackerel occurs in our bay. Respectfully yours, S. Davies. And then here's Elkhana Finney's deposition. I, Elkhana Finney of Plymouth, in the county of Plymouth, mariner, testify and say that about the 20th of June, 1815, being at work near my house, which is situated near the shore in Plymouth, at a place called Warren's Cove, where the beach joins the mainland, my son, a boy, came from the shore and informed me of an unusual appearance on the surface of the sea in the cove. I paid little attention to his story at first, but as he persisted in saying that he had seen something very remarkable, I looked towards the cove, where I saw something which appeared to the naked eye to be drift seaweed. I then viewed it through a perspective glass, and was in a moment satisfied that it was some aquatic animal. with the form, motion, and appearance of which I had hitherto been unacquainted. It was about 1/4 of a mile from shore, and was moving with great rapidity to the northward. It then appeared to be about 30 feet in length. The animal went about 1/2 mile to the northward, then turned about, and while turning, displayed a greater length than I had seen before. I suppose at least 100 feet. It then came towards me, in a southerly direction, very rapidly, until he was in line with me, when he stopped, and lay entirely on the surface of the water. I then had a good view of him through my glass, at a distance of 1/4 of a mile. His appearance in this situation was like a string of buoys. I saw perhaps 30 or 40 of these protuberances, or bunches, which were about the size of a barrel. The head appeared to be about 6 or 8 feet long, and where it was connected to the body was a little larger than the body. His head tapered off to the size of a horse's head. I could not discern any mouth, but what I supposed to be his under jaw had a white stripe extending the whole length of the head, just above the water. While he lay in this situation, he appeared to be about 100 or 120 feet long. The body appeared to be of a uniform size. I saw no part of the animal which I supposed to be a tail. I therefore thought he did not discover to me his whole length. His color was a deep brown or black. I could not discover any eyes, mane, gills, or breathing holes. I did not see any fins or legs. The animal did not utter any sound, and it did not appear to notice anything. I remained still and motionless for 5 minutes or more. The wind was light with a clear sky, and the water quite smooth. He then moved to the southward, but not with so rapid a motion as I observed before. He was soon out of my sight. The next morning I rose very early to discover him. There was a fresh breeze from the south, which subsided about 8 o'clock. It then became quite calm, when I again saw the animal about a mile to the northward of my house, down the beach. He did not display so great a length as the night before, perhaps not more than 20 or 30 feet. He often disappeared and was gone 5 or 10 minutes under water. I thought he was diving or fishing for his food. He remained in nearly the same situation and thus employed for 2 hours. I then saw him moving off in a northeast direction towards the lighthouse. I could not determine whether its motion was up and down or to the right and left. His quickened motion was very rapid, I should suppose at a rate of 15 or 20 miles per hour. Mackerel, menhaden, herring, and other bait fish abound in the cove where the animal was seen. Elkhana Finney. So that was really interesting. I really liked Elkhana Finney's deposition. He was so descriptive. I could actually really picture it all. It was really detailed. I liked that. And as Samuel Davies said, Elkhana was a seafaring man and had seen all sorts of sea life, and he would have known the difference between some of the things it was later suggested the sea creature was. I've seen it suggested that it was leatherback turtle or a basking shark or a narwhal. I think Elkhana probably would have known if it was one of those creatures. He could tell. He thought it was really long. I don't know of a basking shark that's 100 feet long. I don't know. So the Linnaean Society dubbed the creature Scoliophis atlanticus, and I think we should just call it Scully. But there was a lot of controversy over their report, largely because the Gloucester residents had found a small black snake on their beach and had claimed that it was the infant offspring of the sea serpent, and the Linnaean Society took it and put it in their museum. But unfortunately for the Linnaean Society, the French naturalist Charles Alexander Lesieux, I don't know if I said that right, determined that it was actually an eastern racer snake with tumors along its spine. So that didn't go too well for the Linnaean Society. And they ended up dissolving, I believe it was 1822. But there is still a New York Linnaean Society and a London Linnaean Society. So not everyone really took the Sea Serpent very seriously. There was a Charleston playwright who actually wrote a comedy lampooning the whole series of sea serpent sightings and called it the Gloucester hoax in 3 acts. And also, while I was researching for this video, I found a lot of newspaper articles making fun of Cape Cod sea serpents. But let's get back to Plymouth and our bay and our little Scully, who's been swimming around and has been seen by many more people over the years, including a very famous person. And that famous person was Daniel Webster. And the account of Daniel Webster's sighting was told by none other than Henry David Thoreau, who was visiting Plymouth and someone told him the story. And he included it in his summer journal, which you can read. There'll be a link below. But I'm going to read it to you right now. So, on June 14th, 1857, Thoreau was in Plymouth. And he says, BMW tells me that he learns from pretty good authority that Webster once saw the sea serpent. It seems it was first seen in the bay between Manamet and Plymouth Beach by a perfectly reliable witness many years ago, who was accustomed to look out on the sea with his glass every morning the first thing, as regularly as he ate his breakfast. One morning he saw this monster, with a head somewhat like a horse's, raised some 6 feet above the water, and his body the size of a cask trailing behind. He was careening over the bay, chasing the mackerel, which ran ashore in their fright, and were washed up and died in great numbers. The story is that Webster had appointed to meet some Plymouth gentlemen at Manamet and spend the day fishing with them. After the fishing was over, he set out to return to Duxbury in his small sailboat with Peterson, as he had come. And on the way they saw the sea serpent, which answered to the common account of this creature. It passed directly between the bows, only 6 or 7 rods off, and then disappeared. On the sail home, Webster, having had time to reflect on what had occurred, at length said to Peterson, "For God's sake, never say a word about this to anyone, for if it should be known that I have seen the sea serpent, I should never hear the last of it, but wherever I went, should have to tell the story to everyone I met. So it is not leaked out until now." I like that. And poor Daniel Webster, he meets the devil and sea serpents. Everything happens to him, huh? I like that story. That was cute. I don't know how true it is. And I don't know if they were referring to Finney as the person that looked out to sea every morning, because that doesn't quite fit. So maybe it was seen on other occasions, or maybe this is just completely made up. But Thoreau wrote it. But I do have 2 more accounts of the Plymouth Sea Serpent. So in 1884, there was a preacher from England named Reverend John George Woods. And he was very fascinated by marine biology and studied it at length. And this led him to become very interested in sea serpents. And he actually traveled here and collected stories about the sea serpents. And he recorded these stories. So on July 17th of 1875, a Captain Garton of the ship the Norman was sailing off the coast of Plymouth when he spotted a sea monster chasing a swordfish. And he said it was a strange snake-like being swimming rapidly toward the vessel. It seemed to be pursuing a large fish, apparently a swordfish. And then Reverend Wood wrote in his investigation of this sea serpent, "The head of the monster was raised at least 10 feet above the ocean, but remained stationary only a moment, as it was almost constantly in motion, now diving for a moment and then suddenly reappearing to the same height. The submarine leviathan was striped black and white, the stripes running lengthwise. From the head to the tail, the throat was pure white, and the head, which was extremely large, was full black, from which, just above a lizard-shaped head, protruded an inch or more a pair of deep black eyes, as large as ordinary saucers. The body was round, like a fish barrel, and the length was more than 100 feet. The motion was like that of a caterpillar, with the exception that the head of the snake plunged under the water, whereas the head of the worm merely crooks to the ground. And so the Reverend Wood was actually able to find someone who was on another ship called the Roman, and this witness is unidentified, but they also saw the exact same sea creature, just from another perspective. And this is that person's account. Except this person said that the sea monster was being chased by the swordfish, not the sea monster chasing the swordfish. When the swordfish first attacked him, he reared his head at least 10 feet out of the water, and then dove down once more. These actions he kept repeating, so that he had a fine opportunity to scrutinize him. His head was rather flat and closely resembled that of a turtle. The fin we first observed was on the back, several feet from the head, while small fins protruded on each side. The body was at least 80 inches in diameter and presented a shiny surface covered with large, coarse scales. When he moved his head, the water seemed to fairly boil as he rapidly clove his way, so that by far the largest portion of his body must have been under the water. We estimated his length to be at least 60 feet, but the pilot informed us that a few weeks previously he had rowed alongside the steamer Roman, and they reported him to be 120 feet long. So everybody seems to be pretty consistent with their descriptions. That description had some fins on the creature. And I mean, people could have been misidentifying this animal. There could be some creature out there that we don't know about. I just saw on television some people in Florida caught on camera a creature that kind of fits the description of this creature that all these people were seeing in this area, which is really interesting. Is it the same animal? Are we still misidentifying this animal? Who knows? But remember, summer is sea monster season here in Plymouth, so be careful when you're out on the waters in July and August. Scully might come visit you. So now for the portion of our video you've all been waiting very patiently for, including my co-host here. Very patiently waiting. So I do feel a little like P.T. Barnum with my unicorn story for you, but I did find it really interesting. So recently I read this book, 3 Visitors to Early Plymouth, and it's 3 letters from different people that traveled to Plymouth in the 1620s, and it's more of a descriptive accounts from their letters. This was a very boring book, unfortunately. It was only 80 pages, but it was pretty dull. Except at practically almost the last page, I read a couple sentences which were really, really interesting to me, which we'll get to in a minute. But according to an article I read, before the first reports of unicorns in North America, the unicorn had been known to Europeans for over 20 centuries. I had no idea. But as you can imagine, for Europeans that were coming over to North America, to the New World, they didn't know anything about this land and what animals lived here, so their imaginations kind of ran wild at times. The first mention of the unicorn in America came from 16th century explorers, but it was the Dutch geographer Arnoldus Montanus who first discovered the unicorn of North America and wrote about it in his 1671 book, with the English title America being the latest and most accurate description of the New World. And I found his account for you, if you're curious. And it says follows. On the borders of Canada, animals are now and again seen, somewhat resembling a horse. They have cloven hoofs, shaggy manes, a horn right out of the forehead, a tail like that of a wild pig, black eyes, a stag's neck, and love the gloomiest wilderness, are shy of each other so that the male never feeds with the female except when they associate for the purpose of increase. Then they lay aside their ferocity, but as soon as the rutting season is past, they again not only become wild, but even attack their own. I like that the unicorns hang out in the gloomiest wilderness. I like that about the unicorns. So, in this letter from Isaac Davies, and I know I did not say his name right, so it's right here for you. He was sent by the Dutch West India Company as an agent, and he had to deal with the pilgrims and write letters back. And one of his letters, he ends with a very interesting little bit of information about all the different animals he was seeing, and I just found this so interesting. He doesn't know the name of this animal, and nobody seems to know the name of the animal, but, I mean, you have to think maybe he had heard stories of the unicorn over here, and he was maybe on the lookout for something like that. So this is what he had to say in his letter. The savages say that far in the interior there are certain beasts of the size of oxen, having but one horn. They are very fierce. The English have used great diligence in order to see them, but cannot succeed therein, although they have seen the flesh and hides of them which were brought to them by the savages. There are also very large elk there, which the English have indeed seen. So that's very interesting. What is this animal? It sounds like a unicorn. But am I just misunderstanding? What was it though that had one horn and it was giant? And it's mysterious that like the English settlers were trying to see it, but they couldn't. It was a very mysterious animal. I wonder what the hides looked like. That would have been cool. Poor unicorns. Poor unicorns. Okay, so that's the stories for this episode of Plymouth Strange and Unusual. I have lots more, so I'll see you again, I hope. See you next time. Thanks for watching.